So it's an honor to be here with Jennifer Jakovsky. For the love of mystics, this is be a lovely conversation because every time we talk, we learn more from other people's viewpoints. So I decided to call this the Ancient Minds of Sacred Geometry, and it's going to involve 4 distinct luminaries. And the 5th chapter is going to be basically what was their common destiny, or what we call fate. So I call them illuminated souls because they've all changed the world. And just by looking at their lives, we're going to realize that with their schools of higher learning, it's basically the template for what we want today, because we're getting to a point where there's a lot of disinformation in the world. So by looking back on history, we need to understand how we can learn from the past and bring into the world a universal school, especially for children of all ages. The first luminary is Pythagoras. He lived around 570 BC, which is pretty much the same time as Buddha, Lao Tzu, and Confucius. They may have met in their time as they were contemporary. But Pythagoras did set up a school in Greece, but due to political problems, he had to move to Crotona, which is North Italy. And what was distinguished about the school was that it was a school for men and women. It was a brotherhood and sisterhood. And for the first year to enter this school, you had to practice silence, which I love because that's about not gossiping, not wasting your energy, going back to self. And the other year, you had to do a year of fasting, which is cleansing the physical body. Because if the body's not clean, we can't bring in the higher codes, what we call the mathematical transmissions or the celestial transcripts of the divine. And the second one is Hypatia. So she was about 300 AD at the Library of Alexandria. Her father Theon was the head of the museum, and he taught her all the skills of astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy. So she became the head of the world's records at the time, which I really love. She's quite a heroine for me, Hypatia. And if there's a movie called Agora, if ever you watch the movie Agora, you can see it reenacted. And contemporary, and Hippasus is the third member, who was around 400 BC, just after Pythagoras. He revealed too much. He created a mathematical crisis because the Pythagoreans believed in one thing. Their motto was all is number. And that represented whole numbers like 1, 2, 3. So when they examined the square root of 2, which was the diagonal of a 1 by 1 square, it didn't fit whole numbers. And for revealing this error, or this thing they could not explain, something happened to him. And the fourth teacher is Galileo, around the 16th century AD. And he developed the telescope. He didn't invent it, he improved it. And he was able to see all the moons of Jupiter and the phases of Venus. So we all know what happened to him, but he was basically teaching that the Earth is not the center of our solar system. He was saying it was that we are heliocentric. We go around the sun. And that idea shook the whole Catholic world at the time. So let us begin. Entering more now the modern times, we're looking at the 16th century, and we have another man that's basically thrown a spanner in the works of the current philosophies at that time. And that makes him very dangerous because he originally thought differently. And this is a chapter where we look at Galileo's life and we realize that one of the achievements he did as an astronomer was that he actually improved the telescope. People say that he discovered the telescope, but let's say that the telescope was improved. He improved the lens and he was able to see beyond the boundary of the Earth. So by improving the telescope, he discovered a few things that shattered the whole worldview at the time. So he's known as an Italian physicist and a philosopher, but we're going to look at him here in his role as an astronomer. And he was born around 1564. Where he was born in Pisa is a special place because that's where, when we talk about Fibonacci sequence, Leonardo da Fibonacci was born also in Pisa. That's that place where we have the Leaning Tower of Pisa. So it's a place I haven't been to. I've taught in Italy, but I never got to Pisa. But it's interesting that he's from that place where Fibonacci was born as well. Yeah, so prior to Galileo's conflict with the church, most people were Christians at that time, and they were still subscribing to the views of Aristotle, who saw the Earth as the center of the heaven, as the solar system at that time. This is the oldest photograph we have of the telescope that he worked on. But with this, he was able to see the moon, that Jupiter had moons. And he also looked at the Venus cycles as well. But in 1609, he improves the telescope, which was made by a Dutch spectacle maker in 1609. Actually, looking at his manuscripts here, where he started to see with his telescope that the moon had craters and that Venus had phases, and he's the one that gave us the view of the Milky Way, that it was like this stream of thousands and thousands of other solar systems. He also invented the first pendulum clock. And when he looked at the sun, he even analyzed what we call the sunspots. And then he looked at the rings of Saturn. So pretty much everything that we know in our naive view of the galaxy, he'd already seen that. And so we're going back to around 1610 at the moment. When he looked at the moon, it wasn't smooth. He recorded the craters. Even with the length of the shadows to estimate the height of the mountains, you had to use the 3-4-5 triangle. So without the 3-4-5 triangle, you couldn't calculate the height of a mountain or how high these craters were. Because when we know the length of two sides, we can calculate an unknown side. So that's why the 3-4-5 triangle helped him to do this. His main work too was showing all the changes with Venus, which we know that every 8 years, Venus traces the five-pointed star around the sun as we view Venus over 8 years, because its relationship to Earth, 365 days, to Venus takes 225 days. The ratio of Earth's orbit to Venus's orbit is 1.618. So we're in a golden ratio dance with Venus. So over 8 years, it naturally traces the five-pointed star. So he worked all this out, but worked a lot on the cycles of Venus, because there are times when it goes behind the sun, when it's the morning star, the evening star. But his main gift was looking at the moons of Jupiter. We got Io, Ganymede, Europa, and Callisto. So we have to thank NASA for these actual photos of the moons. And there's an interesting twist coming up, because we know that he made all these observations of the celestial bodies around the Earth, but later on he becomes acknowledged in our modern day. So we're focusing on the moons of Jupiter. He sees the Milky Way. That's our understanding of the Milky Way. But what's happening at the time? He's being challenged by the Pope at the time. So he's showing this Doge of Venice how to see the moons of Jupiter. So these are great paintings that I was able to access, or frescoes. But we can see that as he's become an old man now and he's blind. So he's showing another teacher the moons of Jupiter there. Just another portrait of him by Leone. And here he is teaching students at the University of Padua. And he's entering dangerous waters now, because he's teaching his revelations, and it's starting to clash with the church at the time. So here he's known as the father of observational astronomy. But the clash, you can see, we all know what's happening, but basically he's clashing with the Christian view that the Earth was the center of the universe.
I'd be interested in having you share, what is the relevance of Galileo in modern times?
The first probe that goes around Jupiter in our lifetime is named Galileo. So even though he gets persecuted, we're going to talk about his persecution, but the twist is, we're going to see in the next chapter, they apologize to him by a priest, a pope, And then they acknowledged the first satellite that goes around Jupiter and verifies the moons. So we're coming to the fact that modern satellites verified everything Galileo saw.
Wonderful. I'm just also contemplating, and I know where we're going next, but just this idea that every mystic in some way kind of becomes Galileo in that sense that in order to really embrace the mystical path, we have to be willing to see what others refuse and hold that vision until the world catches up.
Oh, I've never thought about that. That changes my whole view on everything, that we have to be tolerant and flexible. I've never considered that at all. That could be a good ending or conclusion to this, yeah. Because we're all at different evolutions of our journey. Oh, and the fate of Galileo, the fourth person. Galileo, as we know, he had to recant. He was never killed. He's the one that wasn't murdered. But basically, because he was in his 70s by the time, but the church begged him to recant and apologize for showing that that the Earth is not the center of the solar system. So he was suspected of heresy for his heliocentric views. All these pictures are just showing he's going to be under house arrest. But because he knows a few, Pope Urban the Eighth, I think, he's got some friends in high places, they spare his life. So there's lots of paintings of him where he's defending himself in court against the Pope, and you know you're not going to win because they're saying that the world is only 6,000 years old. The whole creation was 6,000 years old. So he was sentenced to imprisonment around 1633, but because he has poor health, they spare his life. And that was thanks to a friend he had, Pope Urban the Eighth, who ordered him to appear before the, the Roman Inquisition. So he's charged but spared. And I think it was only his daughter that begged him to obey the heresy and to apologized to the court that all his views were wrong and that even his telescope was nothing more than a magician's trick. So basically, I mean, what a lifetime where you see all the mysteries of the universe and then you have to apologize for discovering that. We'll discuss that in a minute. So he's found guilty, condemned, and imprisoned rather than put to death. He wasn't even allowed to teach in his room, and he dies at the age of 78. But basically, there's a cosmic twist to his story because thanks to technology, we're able to build crafts and space probes. And the space probe that can go to Jupiter and analyze its moons and send us photos back of the four moons, Io, Callisto, Ganymede, it gets verified, and they decided to name the space probe Galileo. So even though he lived a tragic life, imprisoned for his genius mind, he lives today as a kind of a probe called the Jupiter. It's called the Jupiter probe or the Galileo spacecraft model, and I think that's a beautiful posthumous consolation to such an amazing man, that he still lives on in the cosmos. So how many years ago was that? But I forgot to say that in 1758, it was Pope Benedict the 14th from the Catholic Church who said, we're sorry, we're going to lift the ban and we apologize that Galileo's work a century later was indeed correct. So at least we have that in writing that the modern day Christianity are able to correct and honor his life, because I just thought that was a beautiful story or twist to the story. And Galileo orbited for 8 years around Jupiter, and we got some of the best photos. And it actually showed us many of the close passes made by the major moons. We got to see all the volcanoes on Io. We got to see the giant moon of the Ganymede and how it has a magnetic field. And some of them even have, so the Europa has apparently a subsurface ocean which contains more water than the whole Earth. So this probe has revealed all this mysteries have now been solved, we could say. So basically, we need to come to a conclusion and recognize that I believe that everyone has a script, that we all write our story. And even though we may have a tragic story, it it can be like a fire or a flame that can help inspire others. And sometimes it might take centuries to realize the purpose of why we've lived a life, whether were we imprisoned or ridiculed or killed. I think humanity is both transformed and elevated by hearing these stories. So, just a few notes. My first firstly, I had a childhood experience when when I first read about the Library of Alexandria being burnt down, that I mentioned in the introduction. That was an experience that changed my whole life, just from knowledge, history, recording history as we know it. And it triggered my memory that I had lived a life in another time, or I've learned, where did I learn this knowledge? How come I know about all this mathematics? I've never studied with anyone else. So how do I know all this? So my conclusion is that, life is a gift. We have cycles of learning, and that this knowledge essentially is in our cells, that it's never lost, and it's just revisited, replayed, remembered. The word remembered is interesting because the word mem in the ancient Jewish means water. So when we say mem ori, the ori is the light. So mem ori is liquid light. So I believe in our brain cells, which is connected to the ethers, we have all this knowledge in every aspect, not just in the physical body, but in the torus field around us that connects to everything. So that's how we reinterpret, regain, retranslate, reactivate, reignite, and everything is restored. So that's what I mean by it's never lost. So this soul memory is accessed when we find stillness, when we come every day, if you can make a little time just to meditate and to give thanks for the magnificence of all that we are, for all that we have been and all that we ever will be. So I call that grace, when people are given the opportunity to live their greatness. So we can remember who we are, where we came from. That's essentially the definition of sacred geometry: is who am I and where did I come from? And this comes to the modern day. I just stopped for 1 second. I've just got a mosquito there buzzing around my face. So I'll start again. So I believe this is teaching us that we can remember who we are and where we came from. This is the definition of sacred geometry, where the inside is the same as the outside, the internal is the external. So in this lifetime, we remember all these persecutions, but how can we take this modern day persecution complex, this trauma that's carried in our DNA, and how can we move forward and build upon that in a way that becomes a positive and not a negative? And it could be through higher education, it could be by creating better families, it could be by living close to nature, eating better food. But we each have to find our way how to transmute fear into love, and how we can connect with nature more and find creative ways to move this energy through our bodies. And that's why the symbol of Pythagoras, this five-pointed star, is the ultimate symbol of nature. When we look at a five-pointed star, that same numbers that make it is called the phi spiral, which is a seashell. So even though when we look at the five-pointed star, that's the male aspect. Straight lines are masculine, but the feminine version of the Fibonacci sequence is the golden spiral seashell geometry. So when we combine the male and the female, it becomes like whole brain learning. And the ultimate way to connect to everything, the inside and the outside, is to think of the field around you. So I have a little meditation called the Earth Heart Meditation. It's a one breath meditation where we breathe in through the crown and through the base. And in one breath, the two counter rotating fields meet in your heart. And so that's the in breath. And then on the out breath, we fill our torus with that light. So that's one breath. And on the next breath, you expand that radius to the length of 2. And then on the third breath, you can go 3, 5, 8, 13. So when we copy and comprehend how nature works with the Fibonacci sequence, we can breathe into the mysteries and remember that we're at the core of it. Just like an apple, if you look at an apple, it's no different than the shape of this torus, because we are the torus. So a torus has involution, and the other side is explosion, and implosion. And but we can't just have explosion, because explosion creates pollution in the world. That's why our our modern day technology is all based on blasting petrol and fumes, which cause pollution. So we have to create implosive water technology that brings us back to a balance. But if we can incorporate that into our field just by sitting still every day and remembering that everything is inside of us, we can access everything merely by breathing into our heart. And because the heart is the center of your torus, which is the way we access all things in all times and all places. So just like when you stare into this torus that's imploding, we're always in a state of remembering our connection to the monad, to source, to oneness, to whatever we call God. God is the creator of all things in every cell of our body. Just to conclude, for those that want to know more about sacred geometry, I often get asked, how can I learn more about sacred geometry? Like, where do I start? So I do have a beginner's guide to sacred geometry. It's just called Sacred Geometry Beginner's Guide. And it has 29 lessons online, which goes for 12 hours. It's all been pre-recorded, which means you can stop and start and learn in your own time. And we cover all the circles of life and this is just the beginning. So these are just like sentences that are evolving out of the language of shape and pattern. And for those that get the courses, I also give 6 ebooks. These are all free downloads these are my workbooks that I wrote for children, which are also for adults, but these 6 workbooks have all become their own kind of courses. I do a lot of social media. At the moment, we have 2 million followers on social media, and they're the people that help promote us. I give thanks to all the people that are supporting our school, because we want everyone to be learning this. So this has evolved over 40 years of hard work. So everything I've ever done, I've translated it down to the level of a child, where we learn to draw the flower of life. So normally these courses are all valued over $1,000, but we're offering them here at a much cheaper price. And so essentially, to conclude, the best thing that we can do is just always go back to ourselves, go back to the core of our being, remember who we are just by breathing into the love that you are. Thank you for your time. So here we have the circle of life, where I just found this image. I hadn't seen this before. I just thought it'd be a great way to close, that we're not alone, and the harmonics of the circle is a celestial transcript. It's reminding us that we're connected not just to the terrestrial, but to the celestial, that when we breathe into our heart and honor everyone as a form of God, we then become unified.